they barely did any of it. The only thing they really did was they provided the data, and the data showed that stops and frisks just kept going up and up and up and up, and that's why we filed Floyd. I want to, so to get to where we are now in the case, after several years of litigation, in May, the judge in the case issued an opinion and order saying that granting class certification, so granting legally that we actually are now a class, and that class is anyone who has been illegally stopped since January 2005. So that's millions of, potentially millions of people across the city, and are automatically class members. There's no kind of affirmative thing where you have to file something to join the class. You're automatically class members. It is a case where we're asking for what's called injunctive relief. So we're asking for changes, real changes to and reforms to policing in New York. We're not asking for money. So it's really about, again, it's about kind of building towards real change. Whether that, it can take a couple of forms. And that's really, to get to where the two things I want to kind of talk about in that regard and how you can be involved are, number one, just last week, the judge issued a trial date in the case for March 18th, 2013. So that's going to come up really quick. And before then, we want to, we're going to be preparing for this trial, and we really want to hear from potential class members who could also be potential witnesses at the trial. I have some forms back there that kind of give, it's an FAQ, it's a two-page sheet on the table back there, kind of about the case and about, especially whether you're, a class member, how you can be involved in the case. And the real thing there is that we have a website set up called stopandfrisklawsuit.com, and there's a form on that website. And anyone who has been stopped by the New York City Police Department or knows folks who have been stopped by the New York City Police Department can go to that website, and we really appreciate if you fill out that form. The more people who fill out that form and we hear from, the better to kind of, it's in a sense building this, building on this case and this movement, and again, like potential witnesses for trial, especially if you could fill out that form by October 1st. That would be really key. So that's one thing. The other thing that we're going to be working on in the coming months is really thinking about what kind of reforms do we want, whether the two possibilities for the kind of, I'm not sure if end is the right word, but the kind of what we want to get out of this case are either a settlement where we settle with the city and we agree upon certain things that the city is going to change, whether that's independent oversight by some kind of police monitor, more transparency, more data reporting. It could be a number of things. Or we could go to trial and win the case, and we could get those things as well, depending on what the judge orders. And so we really want to hear from community members, from advocates, from organizers, what are these priorities? When you think of things like accountability, transparency, independent monitoring, other methods of accounting for police violations of folks' rights in New York City, what other ways can we build on that? And we really want to make this, not just something where the lawyers are sitting in a room making the decisions about what that's going to be, but we want to make it, we want to make it a decision that comes from people in New York who are being most affected by these policies. And that's really kind of the really very simple but overview of the case as it stands right now. Again, there's the forms in the back, the FAQ forms that have the website and answers to some of the questions on them. And we really like to hear from folks by October 1st. And then just kind of thinking about what do you want to see? What kind of changes do you want to see? And that's, that's one of the reasons that we're part of CPR, Communities for Police Reform, United for Police Reform, which I think Yosan is going to talk a little more about, and really want to, that's why we're here. We really want to, we're honored to kind of be part of kind of the movement itself around fighting, stop, and frisk. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Yosan Lim, who is a social justice artist, organizer, and activist whose work addresses issues of war, state violence, trauma, and resistance. She is currently the director of organizing for the Justice Committee, a grassroots organization that's been working to end police violence and systemic racism in Latino, Latina, and other communities of color in New York since it was founded in the 80s by former young lords. She represents the Justice Committee in the grassroots coalition People's Justice for Community Control and Police Accountability, which is working to build a citywide network of cop watch teams. Which is awesome. She also sits on She also sits on the steering committee of Communities United for Police Reform and co-chairs its Community Empowerment Working Group.
So I apologize to the other panelists if I go over my 10 minutes a little bit, but I just got a few extra topics added on. So what I want to talk about really briefly first is just a little bit of an overview of Communities United for Police Reform. One of the key parts of it, which is the legislation that was introduced to the City Council in February, the Community Safety Act, which was just mentioned. But then I want to focus my comments more on what I think we sometimes refer to as community empowerment strategies, or I would prefer to call strategies for building power in communities in New York City. So really quickly, Communities United for Police Reform, and so there are a bunch of different organizations represented in this room, many of which are already involved in the campaign. CCR, PTH, and the Justice Committee are all steering committee organizations of the campaign. It was launched in February, and I think what it's trying to do is, I think Ian mentioned that the legislation is just one piece of the puzzle. What CPR is trying to do is really try and bring together a lot more of the pieces of the puzzle in a more tightly coordinated way. So we actually have an electoral strategy, a legislative strategy, a research strategy, a litigation strategy, and a community empowerment, community organizing strategy. And what we're trying to do is sort of bring all of those different areas or different sectors together to really build this movement. So really quickly, the Community Safety Act, which is a key piece of legislation, it's actually a bundle of different bills that was introduced in February of this year. I'm going to go over them really briefly because we're going to make an ask to you, which is that on September 27th, we have a rally and advocacy day, and so we would like people to sign up to actually participate in that. Really quickly, Community Safety Act will protect New Yorkers against discrimination by the NYPD. This is essentially strengthening the racial profiling prohibition to include other protected categories and also make it easier for us to go after the police for being discriminatory. Another bill is protecting New Yorkers against unlawful searches. Right now, the cops don't have to tell you that that you don't have to consent to a search if you're being stopped in the street. This will make cops actually do that in the same way that in certain circumstances they have to read you your Miranda rights. Another is requiring NYPD officers to identify themselves and explain their action. A lot of the folks that our members, people that we work with when we do Know Your Rights trainings, talk about not having any idea why they're being stopped, and then when they ask the officer, the officer just says something like, "Because I want to stop you." This would actually change that up. And then the last would be to establish an Inspector General for the NYPD to provide independent oversight over the department. So I'm going to put, so Nahal's actually going to pass around a sheet. If you're interested in getting involved in the September 27th actions and possibly lobbying your city council member in support of the Community Safety Act, please sign up with Nahal. Switching over though, so again I want to talk a little bit about some of the strategies that the Justice Committee and then this grassroots coalition that we work with, People's Justice for Community Control and Police Accountability, are sort of contributing to the campaign and to the movement right now. And so those are Know Your Rights Education and Outreach, Public Art, and Cop Watch. Before I talk about those things in a little bit more detail, those areas of work, I want to just sort of engage on a more, hopefully not too abstract, but slightly more abstract level, this question of why it's important to focus on building power in our communities and the communities that are directly affected by police violence, which may seem obvious, but actually I think what you see, especially with the Community Safety Act getting so much attention, with Stop and Frisk coming up in the media in the way that it is that this could actually become a movement that's about elected officials talking, that's about advocates talking to each other, and sometimes we actually are not thinking about what is actually going on in the communities that we're talking about. So first of all, one of the things is that we have already identified that it's going to take a while to pass legislation. And we need strategies for deterring abuse of policing yesterday, or actually since 1845 when NYPD was founded, but now, definitely. And so some of these strategies that I'm going to talk about are actually about giving tools to the community to deter police abuse, police violence in the moment. Secondly, we need to take the movement to the site of the problem, to the communities that are most impacted. So this allows us to connect with the community about the issue. We're obviously not going to be able to get people involved if we don't go there and talk to them about the campaign, about the movement. But it also keeps it real for us, because if we're not engaging with the folks who are directly affected, it looks like stats, or it looks like what you read in the newspapers, and we actually are not being real with ourselves about what's really going on. Fourth, we're only winning if we're really changing things. And I think that's something that our groups have all said for a long time, and CPR has said from the beginning, that you can change laws and policies on the books,